this data store persistence library, right, which represents an alternative way to shared preferences when we want to store a data in key value pairs through the preference data store. So we want to store the entire object through the proto data store. So both libraries like data store and shared preference, they avoid dependencies with the Android framework. So as you know that it's a shared preference which requires a context object to be initialized and are built using initialize, right? So but data store, the advantage of data store is like it is built using coroutines and flows, and it doesn't and makes the it's ideal candidate when if you are using coroutines in your application and flows. So this might be a good choice if you are using coroutines and flows in your project, right? So this integration allows the data store to notify subscribers to all changes, which means that the developers no longer have to concern themselves with handling the changes. Okay, so with this brief introduction of data store, so we it's better we can go and implement this data store in our application. So what we're going to do is we're going to first implement the necessary libraries for our data store, that is this one. Okay, so and the second step is this is our application that we are gonna update integrate data store to our this application, and we're gonna store the data. So first let's go and create a simple class called setting store. So let me create a things store class. Okay, let me just close that window for the clear the visibility. And we have this class, right? Setting store, and we gonna implement this, but first thing we need is a context dot okay, let me implement the context data store will be our data store with the preference by preference data store, and the name of the our data store is settings store, right? So we have our this is our the first step. So guys, okay, let me just verify something. Preferences data store, data store preferences data store. Okay, so this is okay. Give a context key property. Preferences actually. Okay. This is the preferences class, not the preference. Okay, so now we have our so we have the context data store, right? And then we will have our key text, which is a string preference key text. Now in our settings store we pass our private text, then we have our text flow of string. As I told you in the previously that it's pretty much integrated with coroutines and flow. So data store data, then we have to map preferences. So preferences key text, okay, so it's not concurrent flow, but it's a actually it's a coroutine flow, right? So yes. Okay, so we have our necessary implementation, but we have to also declare our function save text, right, to save the data to our data store, which is pretty much a string, and you pass the, so obviously it's a coroutine, so we have to suspend it. Context data store edit, and you pass the preferences and your preferences with the key is your key text, and assign to the value that we get to save this text, right? So we edit the data store and we assign the value to the preferences key, this value, right? So we define the key for storing the text and field to retrieve the saved text, right? So and this is the method to save the text, right? Okay, so this was the first section. Now obviously we have to go and create our view model. So it will be like settings view model. Obviously it's gonna extend the view model, and your settings view model will consist of obviously the methods to save and to retrieve the value, right? So but obviously we also need to pass the instance of our settings store. Okay, here we have our val text live data, which is the mutable live data of type string, and then we initialize the view model scope and launch our settings store text and collect the flow. We need to collect the flow. Okay, we need to collect the flow and assign the value that we have collected, right? Okay, so now we have our save text function, text of type string. So here we obviously use our view model scope to launch and store and save our text. Okay, so yeah, this is our so you see that view model scope is actually the extension of view model and represents the coroutine scope, and which ensures that the background work is done while view model is still active to avoid any possible leaks, right? So usually using this we can collect the existing text into live data when view model is initialized, and then invoke the save text method from the settings store, right? So now obviously we need to also go and initialize our settings store, but in our application class. Our application class that we are using is node application, and let me just initialize our setting store and create the instance of DataStore. Settings store will be initialized with the instance of a setting store and passing this context, right? Okay, obviously we have already added our nodes application to our application, right, this attribute. And so finally what we have to do is use this data store in our activity to update the view. Okay, so let's go step by step and update the view. So we are gonna update the view now. So let me create a update view private method, update view, and this update view will first has the setting store, right? Your setting store will have a application as a setting, like your nodes application, and we'll have a setting store, and you have our your view model, which is obviously our setting view model, but we will model provider will this object provider factory. So what we have to do is create our view model provider is return setting view model like our setting store as of this type, and then we get our necessary view model, that is our setting view model, right? Class. Okay, so now we have to use this view model to update our view. So we will have our text live. Okay, our settings view model has just private live data, but I also need to assign public live data, which is text live data, data of type string, and is assigned to this text live data, right? The value that we have obtained from the flow, that we have collected from the flow actually. So let's go and update my view. First we observe the live data, then we have to simultaneously update the view. So we use the data binding to get the actually the view binding to get the necessary view, which is our main text view the text, and assign it to the value that we have observed. So finally also we need another identifier, view identifier, that is our button, and we perform our click listener and save our respective data to the data store, right? So we save text binding, we get the value from the edit text string. Okay, so here we are good to go. So if you check out now, if you run the application, you're gonna store the data to your data store. Okay, so my saved data in data store, Okay, if I click, you see my save data in data store. So if I now cancel my application and relaunch my application, you see my save data in data store is still present there, right? And this is how we use data store to save the data to the respective uh, like data store that we have created. And okay, where is my, yeah, and this is our the name of the preference data store that we have created. Okay, TINGS, actually this is the real name, sorry guys. So we can, obviously it has can change because I have changed my preference data store. So my new data, so whenever you change your the name like of your data store, obviously you're gonna reset everything, right? So now it's gonna state here like, okay, so let me cancel and relaunch it. You see it's saved there with this data store name, right guys? Thank you guys, and catch you later.